New episode of NoCode Wizardry, and today we want to talk about the 5 biggest obstacles that we typically see our customers facing when they're trying to scale their Bubble applications, or even just get them up from the ground, kickstarted.
These are the 5 big ones that really people struggle with.
Do you want to dive into them, right? Without any.
Sure, but I think before we get started, we should remind people to, if you want to up your Bubble game, to use the link that we put in the description and grab free access to our NoCode Resource Center.
What is that?
It's updated weekly. It has plugins. It has how-to videos. It has cool books to read.
Podcast episodes that haven't necessarily been recorded by us, but podcast episodes that we found interesting and that we believe can help you in your no-code journey as well. A lot of them are about entrepreneurship and just business in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Anyways, that is linked down in the show notes down below. So just, like Dennis said, go ahead and check it out. It's 100% free, and we update that resource center every week. And with that said, let's talk about obstacle number 1, which is that a lot of people, when they're playing and, when they're getting started with Bubble, they come across this problem, which is that their app is too slow. What are some of the main reasons why Bubble applications are slow?
So I think my biggest pet peeve, and it definitely speaks to newbies a bit, is the plugin bloat.
And that reminds me of my WordPress journey, because when we used to work a lot with people in the WordPress space, and that is also one major point of conflict, right? I mean, we've logged into websites where customers just love fixing problems that they may have by trying to install a plugin that tries to solve that particular issue.
And then there's conflicts, and I think though that in Bubble there's even a more important thing with plugins, is that even if you're not using that plugin on your specific Bubble application page, it's being loaded into memory on every page. So you have to be careful about that. You have to understand that, usually little plugins that do little visual things like a slider or a progress bar, those don't really matter. But any more complicated plugin that has a lot of functionality, that uses external APIs, that does calculations and stuff like that, they're going to slow your app down.
Which also goes to say that it's not so much a problem of how many plugins you've got installed on your app or even on your website. Like if you're building on WordPress, for example, I've logged into WordPress websites with, that have 80 different plugins installed on them. And there's some of the fastest websites I've seen in my life. They load instantly, but because of those plugins that they're using, they've been well designed, they've been well built, and they don't bloat your website. And something similar happens with Bubble. I mean, if you're installing a plugin that is loading and firing up on every page, then you're gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
And something similar happens with fonts as well.
Fonts are another big one, yeah. And people don't understand, but if you use a font on one text field in the farthest, remotest corner of your application, hidden away, where nobody even goes there, that font is loaded on every page loaded in your application.
How do you fix that? How do you not?
Oh, that takes wizardry, my boy.
So, I mean, how do we do it so that we make sure that we're only using fonts that fire up when they're needed?
No, you can't do that. If you put it into your application, it's going to get loaded on every page load. The only thing you can do is not use them. So you just need to be careful. Don't put fonts, don't put icon sets into your application unless you really need them. And usually one app font is good enough, maybe 2 if you want to be really sophisticated, but be really careful. Going back to plugins, sometimes plugins bring their own fonts in and you don't realize it. And sleuthing them out and finding where in your application that mysterious font lives, it's a painful thing to do. There's a video in the Resource Center that talks just about that, so we're not going to dig into the weeds, but it is a pain to go and find them. So the best thing to do is just not use them.
And one thing that you can do is spend a little bit of more time during the design process of your application, which is something that we do. We have our own team of designers that works with us. And what we do is we design applications that literally only make use of one font style. That font style, because we are a particular fan of it, is usually Enter. Enter works really well because it looks really nicely on headings, it looks really nicely on body paragraphs, and we can rock and roll an entire design of an application with just that one font. Sometimes it changes, sometimes it's Montserrat, sometimes it's something else. But we're really good at designing applications that can be powered by a single font, and you're still going to have that nice contrast from a design standpoint as to how do your headings look like in contrast to your body paragraphs, and it looks pretty well. You can design really nice looking applications with just one font.
Sure.
So something else that you should probably talk about is database design.
That is the second, or maybe the first, biggest problem with many bubble applications. If you're not careful about how you structure your database, if you use a lot of list fields with big lists, that's going to make things slow down. Bubble brings a lot of data into the user's browser on every page load based on what it estimates could be needed. It's really sophisticated in the way that it does that, but that can provoke a lot of data moving back and forth between the Bubble servers and the user's browser, and that slows things down. So you have to be really careful about how you do that. Also, set your privacy rules up well, because your database almost always has a lot of fields that aren't needed in the user interface, but they are used in the back end. Well, you should make sure that your privacy rules don't allow those fields to be served to the client browser.
Can you talk about how we've implemented caching?
So that is a bonus advanced tip, and it is something that has worked really well for us in some applications. It's not a universal do this and it works for everything, but when you have data types that aren't being changed frequently, so a blog post, for example, well, there's really no reason for you to be constantly polling the database for that content, because it hasn't changed. And so by implementing database caching, and it's a little tricky, and you have to do some work in your application to set it up, and you have to be know how to do it. By the way, that's going to be in an upcoming video. But it does allow you to control the data that is actually being sent to your Bubble application. Bubble constantly polls the database normally, but if you use caching, then that's not happening, because it's going via an API call, and once it's pulled, it can be cached in the edge server, and it's not even affecting Bubble. So you're actually saving money from Bubble as well.
Because you're not making use of as many workflows.
Exactly.
Interesting. So I think that sums up obstacle number one, which is speed and people having problems with loading times. Let's talk about obstacle number two, which is ranking, SEO. A lot of people think that, hey, you're building in Bubble, you can build great applications, but they're not going to be seen by anyone because you can't get them to rank on Google.
Well, we've talked about this on numerous occasions, and it is something that's really important. And I think the message is to say, first of all, Bubble applications can rank.
We've ranked, and we continue to rank at the very top of search engines for multiple applications of ours. So
yeah, it can be done, and even more importantly, your application deserves to rank.
Yeah.
So there are some peculiarities about using Bubble, and you have to understand them, and they do affect SEO. And you also have to do the work. There's no, although we do have a really fun, cute little robot, AI-powered robot that will help you.
Serpy.
Hey Serpy. There's a call out to Serpy. Maybe he'll bounce up here in the middle. There's still a lot of stuff that you need to do. You need to optimize your application. You need to really work on the internal linking structure. You need to work on how you set up your workflows. There's a lot of things that go on, sitemaps. Lots of stuff that you need to understand, but if you get it right, your application will definitely rank. It can and it does deserve to rank. And here we are. Let us know if you need help.
So the summary is that yes, it's not as easy as just hitting a few checkboxes and just letting your app miraculously rank. There's a little bit of work that has to go into it, but it can rank.
It can and it will.
It can and it, I like the authority there. Obstacle number 3 is the bugginess that oftentimes comes with bubble applications. But I feel like that's just, it's not bubble, it's you. It's how you've built your app, which may lead to potential bugs.
Right, but sometimes it's due to just not understanding enough about how bubble works on the insides. I did a video not too long about synchronicity, and a lot of the bugs people have in their applications are due to the fact that they don't really understand how workflows execute. They don't go in order. Just because it's, it used to be left to right, now it's down to, top to bottom, and they look like they're steps that go consecutively. That's not how bubble works. It will, once it starts a workflow, it will try to do every step at the same time.
It's confusing because from a design standpoint, when you're looking at that sequence of things that are supposedly happening in order, it is confusing. I can see how someone would think, oh, I have this first step at the very top, so that's going to happen first, and then as things go...
Right, and then it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Or it does at sometimes, and it doesn't at other times, because you could be, things may... When there's not any demand on the application, it may not really happen and you may not notice. And then when there's a lot of people trying to access your application, things go slower and those synchronicity issues become more important. It's not a problem that can't be fixed. Bubble has the tools inside it to make sure that doesn't happen. You just have to know how to use them.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between front-end workflows and back-end workflows? Because I feel like that's also a main key point where a lot of bugginess comes into play.
It's funny that you say that, because sometimes when people ask me, hey, can you look at my bubble application? And I'll go in, they'll give me access, and I'll go in. And the first thing I do is I look and see, are they using back-end workflows? Because for me, that is a clear indicator of whether or not you're a good
bubbler.
Well, I don't want to say good, because you could be really good at, but if you're not using back-end workflows, you're not a professional.
What's so special about backend workflows?
Well, first of all, they execute on the server. So they don't depend on whether or not your customer has a, M4 Mac Pro, super ultra processor with tons of memory. It doesn't matter if they're on a cell phone. It doesn't matter, anything about, what browser they're using or how old their computer is, because it happens on the server. So that instantly makes your application more responsive to the user's needs, because you're not asking their infrastructure to do work that isn't necessary. So that's just good practice. Everything you can move to the server, do so. I mean, that's usually a good idea. Now, if something needs to happen when a person clicks a button and it has to happen instantly, well, then that's in a client-side workflow, and that's fine. And you can have them work together. So a client-side workflow can offload part of its work to a back-end workflow, and that's perfectly normal and a good way to do things. So that is I think an important lesson to learn.
What's so special about return values?
Oh, these are fun. This is something kind of new. I mean, Bubble gets lots of splash when they do AI streaming and they do mobile development, and hey,
hats off.
Tony's hats off. I don't have a hat today, but they do some things that are really cool, and then nobody even really talks about them. And the ability now for a custom event or an API call to return a value is really useful. It will save you money if you set your workflows up right, because you're basically creating local variables inside your subroutines so that you can, for example, do a search in a custom event at the beginning of your workflow and just return the results of that search. And then you can use those results all the way through your workflow and you don't have to repeat the search. Well, guess what? You're not repeating the search. You're not paying Bubble more money, and you're saving, making your application more efficient. So yeah, I really think that custom events with return values are really slick.
What about backend transaction queues?
Oh, that's another advanced bonus here. So it talks back to the synchronicity issue that we were discussing. And within a workflow, you can use custom events and you can use the result of step 3, whatever, to control inside a workflow the order of operations. But what happens when there's multiple workflows? What happens when you have, a user's making, doing multiple things at the same time? And those are firing off the same workflow on the same data. It can get really messy and, they can step on each other's toes. And this is one area that Bubble doesn't give you a good solution for, because even if you, run a workflow, schedule a workflow on a list, that doesn't mean, if that workflow does a lot of stuff, it can still be fighting between, calls to access the same data. And if you have 2 routines accessing the same data at the same time, you can confuse the application. And so a backend queue is a way of making sure that your workflows execute in order and that they finish before the next one gets a turn. And it takes some effort, it takes some work, but we've got in that resource center a good guide on that.
That's how we've managed to crack down on finance track and make it more
make it calculating running balances is one area that is tricky to do. It took us a while to figure out.
It did take us a while
because it is complicated. Yeah. Because if you have a person goes back and changes a transaction that happened 6 months ago, you've got to recalculate all those balances. And then while it's doing all those recalculations, you got to be sure that nobody else is, trying to do it at the same time.
All right, let's move on and talk about obstacle number 4, which is a little bit more about design. And let's face it, a lot of people that are going to be using your Bubble application or even your mobile application, now that mobile apps are a real thing with Bubble, it means that your app needs to be mobile responsive.
Yeah.
I mean, websites have had to be mobile responsive since the last 15 years.
Yeah.
It's no exception. Your app has to be responsive and it needs to work well on all sorts of mobile devices, whether it's an iPad, whether it's a smartphone.
And the truth is that a lot of applications should start off being mobile first. They should actually start off thinking about the mobile experience before the desktop experience.
So one thing that I've been meaning to do, and hopefully I'll get around this soon, is do a video around how we do design and how we do mobile responsiveness here at Ratio. But you need to you guys really need to stop lowballing your responsiveness. I mean, building mobile responsive applications is really about math.
Yeah, it is math. It is doing
It's about
numbers.
figuring out where your breakpoints are going to be as you scale down your screen sizes or as you scale up your screen sizes. And once you figure out what those scale points are going to be, what those breakpoints are going to be, it really isn't that hard.
No, I mean, get comfortable using columns and rows. That's a big deal with mobile responsiveness, and there really isn't. It's
Flex.
not that complicated, but be careful. Don't make 50 different layers deep, because that will slow things down as well.
Custom styles inside Bubble, just double check and make sure that you've optimized things for mobile devices as well. If your H1 headings are 52 pixels big on desktop devices, then make sure that they look good on mobile devices as well.
Yeah.
These are simple things that you may want to just double check, make sure that you're doing. The responsive tab in the builder, make sure that you add a custom breakpoint at 536 pixels, just to make sure that is a breakpoint for tablets, that is a breakpoint for, now that they're coming up with these foldable smartphones, it's just a nifty little breakpoint that you want to make sure you're checking. And then, one thing, for example, we can talk about option track here. So option track deals with a lot of tables today. But tables were not a thing like 2 years ago in Bubble, right?
Yeah.
So we had to use repeating groups.
We started off with repeating groups.
We started off with repeating groups, and we moved all those repeating groups over into tables.
I don't know if all of them, but
I think
most of them, yeah. And I'm pretty happy with tables. I think that Bubble could go back and finish the job. They kind of have left it, I'd say 75% there. I mean, they could make tables better. There are things they could figure out and make better, but
yeah. The main reason why I brought this up is because tables are 100% more mobile friendly than repeating groups. They're easier to maintain. They're easier to just make them horizontally scroll when you're on a smartphone. So it's just going to make your life a whole lot easier. But yeah, I agree. There's a few things here and there that Bubble could still...
yeah. I mean, it would be nice to be able to sort by columns,
for example,
inside the table, right? Without having to, program it or, do the pagination natively instead of building it into your workflows. But hey, those are just workarounds.
And the last obstacle that we wanted to talk about is maintaining your Bubble application over time. And this obstacle is really just for us to give you some tips on how to make your life easier. For example, the first thing that we wanted to mention is you really have to start using reusable elements.
Yeah, that's my second thing I look at when somebody asks me to look into their
How
Bubble
many
application.
reusable elements do they have?
Yeah, and when you go in and see the backend workflows are empty or pretty much empty, and the reusable elements are not there,
or there's only two of them, like header and footer.
Yeah, something like that. Then you start thinking, we need to give this customer a little bit more education because reusable elements are lifesavers.
Why?
Because they allow you to build something once and use it wherever you want without having to copy paste. And
you save time.
You save a lot of time, and it really shows up in the maintenance part of the life cycle of your Bubble application. You can get away with not using them when you're starting out, and that will get out of hand. And you'll come back and you'll say, I should have done this as a reusable. I should have done this as a reusable. I should have had a reusable inside this reusable to make my life easier. If you structure things well at the beginning, you don't have to do all that work in the, a lot down the road. So, that's a good example of how a little bit of planification can.
We've already talked about this one earlier, but moving as many of your front-end workflows into back-end workflows is also a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we talked about that, but it's also a good idea to really start thinking about what elements in your Bubble application are used multiple times, because that's where you need to put the focus, because there's nothing more boring and more frustrating than having to fix a bug 17 times because you have it, you found it in one place and now you've got to go fix it in all the other places that use the same idea or the same workflow but aren't in a reusable. That is grunt work that nobody wants to do, and it's also opening the door towards things falling through the cracks. You forget, if you've got something copied 15 times and you fix it 14, well, that 15th time is the one that's going to come back and bite you in the ass. It's going to happen. And, it's not easy. Bubble, at least it has the little, looking glass thing to find, every time you use a field or something. But,
Now, when we were planning for this podcast episode, Dennis included this item here under obstacle number 5, which is to make your menu items or your menus to stop hard coding them and instead have them be powered by option sets. Why did you throw that in there?
From personal frustration, that is one of the things that makes maintaining an application unenticing, is that you have to go and make a change in a menu, something as silly as that, And then you have to remember, oh, but I've got to change it in the mobile menu. And then I've got to go change it on this secondary header that uses a different color scheme. And then I've got to go change it. And then you say, oh, gosh, just because I wanted to change one text in a menu, I've got to
add in one menu item.
Or add in one menu item.
You got to go to 25 different places.
Or change the icon for a menu item. And now I've got to go 20 different places and change it. That's just kind of not
convenient.
Cool. It's not convenient at all. And one of the cool things about option sets is that they are really fast. They're not using the database, and so it's a good example of how you can save some time and headache.
You are a big fan of creating, you like to call it the special reusable element, where you essentially just drop in there a bunch of different custom events.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I already talked to you about I love custom events. They're great for making sure things happen in order and all of that. And don't think about reusable elements as only visual things on your page. Your business logic is also reusable. So if you have a custom event that calculates the total of an invoice, and you may need to use that on 5 or 6 different pages, well, don't copy that custom event from one page to the other. Put it into a reusable element that only has custom events in it. And then there's a really cool feature in Bubble, which is trigger a custom event from a reusable element. And so now you can just take this, it's like having your own little toolkit. You can just take it from page to page and use the ones that you need. And it'll save you just a boatload of time.
So I think that wraps up the probably most common obstacles that people come across when they're trying to build something with Bubble. A lot of the things that we've talked about in today's episode, we've addressed in how-to videos or mini videos that we posted on our YouTube channel. Again, you don't have to go through the gazillion different videos that are on our YouTube channel. You can just go to our resource center. It's completely free, and you're going to see them properly listed in a really nice way for you to clearly identify, okay, I need help with understanding custom events. It's going to be clearly labeled, and you can just click on that link. It will take you to the proper video where you can learn about that specific topic. It's linked down in the show notes below. I think this was an interesting episode.
Yeah, I think it was, I hope that it will help people on their Bubble journeys, get there faster and have a better application. And when you call and you say, hey, I want you to look at my Bubble application, I don't have to smile at your lack of reusable elements or back-end workflows. I can see that you're doing a good job, and I will congratulate you on our next call.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again for another week.
Talk to you guys soon.
And we'll catch you guys soon. Bye.